Hello everyone, nice to see you all. I hope you've all been well. And today we are going to talk about a book that I really enjoyed reading recently. This book is Paradise by Abulrazak Gurnah, a British writer hailing from Zanzibar. And Zanzibar is today part of Tanzania. And the book is fantastic. It's been nominated for the Mann Booker Prize a long time ago, back in the mid 90s, and since then, of course, Gurnah won the Nobel Prize. So it's been reprinted, and people are engaging with his work again. That's how I came upon it, and I just wanted to offer a very short overview and a couple of ideas on this book because it's been a um, very entertaining book, and in some ways an intellectually exercising book. It gave me a little jog in a sense. If you look at the book, it's divided into a couple of larger units, and the Titans, the Walled Garden, the Mountain Town, the Journey to the Interior, the Gates of Flame, a Clot of Blood. You can all see that they're very symbolic, meaningful titles. There is an interesting parallel that you will find. The main character here is young Yusuf, who lives on Zanzibar, and his father is a businessman. And I don't want to ruin any adventure or surprises for those who intend to read the book. He ends up in the employment of a wealthy merchant living in one of the larger coastal cities. And the book is really running on two tracks. In one track follows Yusuf's um, coming to age story, how he gets used to his new work, how he tries to understand the world around him, and I think this part of the book is amazing. The psychology of the book is deep. There are rich details about everyday life, about Yusuf's life in the employment of this merchant, and the book really gets across a fantastic atmospheric, pregnant mood that can carry you away into the world that Gurnah wants to talk about. Um, Yusuf is a very sensitive man, which makes, of course, the work of the narrator and because of that also the writer a little bit easier. He's very perceptive, and but he is also sensitive in the sense than being somewhat gentle, somewhat more afraid, somewhat more withdrawn than many people around him. And because of this, being left out of many things, one of the interesting things is how he handles this. Um, you will find an interesting parallel with the Bible, the story of Joseph. However, both the ending of the book and some of the turns throughout the book lead Yusuf to a different path than how the biblical story plays out. Um, Now, some of the interesting bits about the other track in the book that I mentioned, which is mainly in comprised of the journey to the interior, the gates of flame, and the in somewhat to some extent the mountain town. They handle a journey that Yusuf undertakes into the far interior of Tanzania, and where the book is set, and the trader whom Yusuf is working for has some interesting connections um, to the tribes living in that area. If you check the map, you can see that the area where they travel around the Great Lake um, is very near to the areas which are today the border of Tanzania and Ethiopia and Rwanda. And this is, of course, a flashpoint of colonialism, and already back at the time where the book is set, which is probably the beginning of the 20th century. There are no years, but most likely we are somewhere on the eve of the First World War. And as you know, this part of the world has been colonized by the Germans, which does have an effect on the story. Um, Interestingly, the story balances how sheltered the life of a child can be, how naive a child can be, how unaware of what's going on in the larger world. And this is very well balanced with how the things in the larger world really influence what happens in our private lives as well. Now Yusuf, because of his very he has to adapt to working and living in a new place at a very young age. He doesn't develop a certain type of resilience and faith in himself. He doesn't have a lot of weight to his personality until he goes on the journey to the interior, and even after that it takes him some time to figure out what kind of person he wants to be. He's offered an interesting dilemma, and that's, it's a lovely thing in a book. It's a little bit how Hans Castorp's story ends um, in the Zauberberg by Thomas Mann, the Magic Mountain. In that book, as you know, um, Mann criticizes a certain type of attitude that he saw as prevalent, especially among middle class and wealthy Europeans um, around and before the First World War, well into the maybe 2030s, running up to the Second World War. Many people tried to withdraw into the private sphere, and if they had the funds to lead lives where they entertained themselves in intelligent and interesting ways by philosophy, by science, by playing card games, board games, by reading, by listening to music, still, nevertheless, not really wanting to do anything or make anything, and definitely not to change anything and to make an impact. And in that book, in the end, the protagonist realizes the impotence of the situation and decides to act in a very radical way, joining the war. Now, Yusuf's story doesn't hurl Yusuf in the same way um, into an active life from comfort. Yusuf has to go through more suffering and more development on his own strength um, without much support. But still, it's an eerie parallel in something you might want to look into. It also throws an interesting light of how many people approach the world today. You see, when you go to YouTube or any other mass media um, provider, you will find that there are so many ways of entertaining yourself with podcasts, lectures, interviews with scientists, politicians, analysts, and so on. And these are very useful, very fun. There are a lot of interesting, intelligent, funny people out there, and you should listen to them. But at the end of the day, people do need to be active beyond these spheres. Um, we do need to join organizations, whether political, charity, um, sports, but without those kinds of real life bonds and activities, nothing much can be changed in the world. In Yusuf's story is a reminder, don't be just a patient to whom things happen. At some point, it's better to um, assume, well, better in certain ways. Perhaps more responsible to assume charge of your life. Now, as you see, these first couple of passages in the book give away quite a lot. Gurnah writes, Yusuf saw two Europeans on the railway platform at that time. He was a young boy, the first he had ever seen. He was not frightened, not at first. He went to the station often to watch the trains come noisily and gracefully in, and then to wait for them to haul themselves out again, marshaled by the scowling Indian signalman with his pennants and whistle. Often Yusuf waited hours for a train to arrive. The two Europeans were also waiting, standing under a canvas, owning with their luggage and important-looking goods neatly piled a few feet away. Um, and eventually Yusuf gets scared by the two foreigners, and if you piece things together, this is an African country, but Yusuf is obviously living in a part of the country that has been influenced by Arabic culture, even though it's quite south. This is because large parts of Africa has been colonized by different Arabic empires, kingdoms, and sultanates. Um, but there are also Indians and Europeans here, and Yusuf feels the otherness and some of the danger that he doesn't have any control and not much knowledge about these people and what's going on. He ends up home, runs back to Mummy, and this is in a sharp contrast with how he's going to be forced to cope with the realities of life. There isn't always this escape um, back to back to his mother, and I don't want to spoil much of the book. And the writing is really rather good, and very easy to read. The story has a good narrative power. It sucks you in. There are people, things are happening. It's quite dynamic. It's not just monologues about internal life or descriptions of nature. There's a lot more going on. The interpersonal relationships are complex, so there's plenty to digest, and to exercise your imaginations. Based on this book, Gurnah definitely deserved the Nobel Prize. It's a sophisticated and very strong um, work, and I'm looking forward to read more books by him, and I can very warmly recommend it to all of you. One more point that's interesting and that ties this book to Thomas Mann's work and the current events is, many people today still live in circumstances where, although their countries are formally free, former colonies especially, they still are under the effective dominance of countries which control most of the investments and the productive forces of these countries, which is true of much of Africa, some parts of South America and Asia as well. And in these parts these days, of course, the US and China wield enormous power, but to some extent some European countries like the Brits and the French especially still do as well. Uh, some people say we should agree with Voltaire and tend to our own gardens. And that's certainly the safe way. If you read Candide by Voltaire, you'll find that getting involved can lead to pain and suffering and death in so many ways. But then again, not getting involved only works if you have no stakes and no connections, no belongings. Um, if you're happy to make the kind of choice where you give up your agency and you're content being acted upon, you're of course not. Most of us are not slaves. Very far from it. We live comfortable lives in wealthy countries, or at least well organized, stable countries. But um, how much influence do you have over what job you do? How easy it is for you to change your employment? How much influence do you have over where you live? How much influence do you really have over who leads your country and how? We might all have to make harder choices than what we are inclined to. And Yusuf's story is a very poignant and moving reminder of this. But thank you all for watching. I hope you do pick up the book and enjoy it. And have a great day and keep up reading.